Okay, today I was thinking maybe I just wanted to bring up some things in regards to other races, because sometimes when I have groups here, say when I have Monroe here, we do excursion weekends in Monroe, and a lot of people have experiences with other races during these Monroe excursions when they go into an out-of-body state. And what I found really interesting is that some of the people have exactly the same experience, not necessarily in the same weekend, but maybe the next weekend somebody will come and go, oh, Inge, this has happened, and and then they explain it, and they said, you won't believe it. And I go, actually, I heard exactly the same story 6 months ago in the excursion from someone else. So I find that really interesting, that it seems to be now more common. And I just wonder if many people have this experience and they just don't want to talk about it, or why it is that we don't hear much more about it. Maybe we could put that out one time on Wendy's page or something, to just say to people, when you do Monroe or even during normal meditation, do you have contact with ET, different races? And so when I was looking at the ET things happening here, for instance, there is, I don't know if I told you already, but I probably did, but that I had no idea about ET, had never thought about ET, was never anywhere in my mind, and I was sitting for a medium who is a physical medium, just because we wanted to have a sit, and there was an ET within the pyramid which frightened me so much. I was shaking. It was really scary, because it was, first of all, it was midnight. I live in the country and there was nobody around. And so when I saw this ET, I didn't even know it was an ET. For me, it was something just very strange looking. And the medium was gone. All I see was this person, not a person, this 3D structure, so to speak. It went, and then it returned, and then it went. And the third time it came back, I wasn't as frightened, because if it was something was going to happen, it would have happened beforehand. And then 6 months later, I met a medium who is in Queensland. I'm in Sydney, and he has contact with just this race in Queensland. So I guess in a way I was prepared for it. But there's so many others of my friends who had contact with so many different races. Like, we looked at it the other day, like, the Arcturians, the Zetas, the reptilians, the Anunnaki, the Anorians, the praying mantis looking race, bird people. It just is so, I find it is so interesting, and I just don't really understand why we don't hear more about it. Just not UFO groups, just normal people like us. So, William, have you heard much more about other races, or have you just worked with the Zeta?
No, I've just worked with the Zetas myself.
Have you come across the Anunnaki? Have you spoken to the Anunnaki?
Yes, I talked to the Anunnaki once. Yes.
Yeah. How did you go with that? They're very different than the Zetas, I find.
I'm not sure. I didn't. It seemed when I talked to the Anunnaki that he seemed, I don't know, kind of like a cardboard cutout almost. Like he was telling me stuff he'd already told people before, maybe, and And I didn't really relate to him the way I did with the Zetas. So, they're a different race. They like the symbolism of warfare. They don't have wars anymore, but they have kings and that kind of thing.
12 kings. 12 kings.
12 kings, you're right. Yeah. And I mean, it's an interesting story, and they apparently do go around the universe creating races like us. So the Sitchin story, if you're familiar with it, is not quite the way they see what they did here. They have their own perspective, and
especially with the gold.
Yeah.
He would say to me, "Have you gold? Did you bring me gold?" I go, "No."
Yeah, why would I want gold? He said. Yeah. Well, the story is that they needed to somehow or other refresh their atmosphere or something like that. That's the reason given by the people here. But apparently that he doesn't agree with that.
No, not really. He doesn't. I really enjoyed having contact with the Zeta Race, just for the fact that they forever wanted to educate. And that's my favorite thing with spirit people, with other races, to learn something new. So, so the expert on the Zeta Race is William. I met a race though, which they would say to us, if you would see us, you would just see light. You wouldn't see a body. We have never been on the earth plane incarnated. We just observing. We just observers. But for me, with that race, I found it was just an unbelievable feeling of unconditional love when they were present. I found them just, yeah, it was just such a bliss sitting with them. So I would just ask my friend if I could sit for her just for that feeling. And I had a very, very good experience with them, that I was sitting with my friend by myself, and the Anorians came and they were saying to me, "Oh, we want to, wait a minute, we show you something." And so I thought, what can they show me? And so as I was sitting in the room, and I wasn't tired, I had no preconceived idea, I didn't have a drink or drugs or anything, and suddenly the walls on both sides of me started to become like bubbles of energy. It was just, yeah, like bubbly, really. And the walls became all the way on either side of me. Then the back of the back wall turned the same. Then suddenly the cabinet disappeared. Then the chair the medium was sitting on, and then the medium. So I was very, very concerned. I was concerned how I explained to the husband that I lost his wife. That was all I was worried about in that moment. And so, it was serious. I was just like, oh my God, where is this all gone? And then from the back wall, which was also this energy wall, it was like people were stepping into that energy, and I could see their outline. And maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes, and suddenly it stopped. And then from next to me, the wall started to become solid again, and the cabinet turned back, the chair, and then the medium turned back. And they said, we just wanted to give you an experience. And that's it, that was it. And when the medium came back, she goes to me, "Oh my God, did you see a ghost?" And I go, much worse than a ghost. And then I was explaining that to her, and she said she felt no different. Like, for her, it was just a normal sit. She did not feel any different. And another time I met the Anorians, a friend of mine was there, and he was asking a question about higher self. And he asked the question about 5 times, the same question, just a little bit a different way. And so the Anorian goes, oh, let us try another way. And I was sitting next to him, and I had the feeling as someone, that's how I would probably believe a computer download would be maybe. Somebody was giving me the words, and they were just coming like clack, clack, clack in my head, and then I would say them. And the guy next to me goes, I get it. I get it. I know what he means. And so the Anorian goes, oh, telepathy works really well. And I go, yeah, it does. It was a very good experience. And he said the same. We only wanted to give you an experience. But that race have no form. So they say we would see them at light. And then once I experienced a reptilian, I am not clairvoyant, so I can't see, but the medium in the room, I said, oh, there's somebody standing next to me, and it's just, I don't like it. And so she said, oh, it's a reptilian race. So I don't know much about them either. Energies for me just feel different, but I can't see them. Except I saw the Zeta Race a couple of times in front of the medium, and then once in the pyramid. But the Zeta Race, I'm sure William can tell you much about them, and especially maybe how they live and how the family system works. And William?
Yeah, I could go into that a little bit.
That'd be nice, their culture. Why are they here? Why are they working with the human race?
Well, those are two different approaches, 2 different stories.
Okay.
They who they are and where they live and that kind of thing, I only have their word for it, right? And sometimes I wonder whether or not they just give us placeholders to, like, they just fill in stuff that we want to know, even though it's not very important. Like they say they're from a planet, Zeta Race, which is about 30-some light years away. And I don't know if they, I guess I have to believe them when they say that, because I believe most everything else they say. So they live on this planet that is mostly, well, fairly dim, I guess. They live underground. There's a catacomb, sort of a planet-wide catacomb that they live in. They live underground because the surface of the planet was destroyed by some other race, many years ago. And so they just moved underground rather than try to fix the surface.
The reptilian race?
The Dracos, I think, the reptilian race, yeah. Apparently that's who they were, and supposedly they are visiting us as well. They warned us, keep our guard up. This is the one race, I guess, that they don't really trust. Although they do say that every race that's here is working for the good of all.
Maybe the balance needs to be kept.
Yeah.
Those who are very for the human race, and those who maybe want to use the human race for something else, maybe there has to be a balance like in everything else.
Okay, so they live a long time compared to us. Well, what a lifetime for them is not quite the same as a lifetime for us, because they can clone a new body when the old one wears out, and they can transfer their consciousness to the new body, and so it gets a little complicated. Well, they say that fairly often, that our lifetimes are too short, and spend half of it learning how to get along, how to do, how to eat, that kind of thing, and when we should be spending the time, advancing ourselves and learning new things and that kind of thing. And I'm not sure if I agree with them on that we're in a worse situation than they are, because they exist on one timeline. This one, this whole issue of timelines is something else. But we apparently when we incarnate, there are many timelines on many different vibrational levels. And so we experience a lot more in one lifetime than they do. But their lifetimes are longer, so maybe it all averages out in the end. I'm not sure. Yeah, so they live about 1,000 or 1,500 Earth years before they replace their bodies. They gave a description of or some clues as to what their bodies are like, and I don't remember them all right now. They have different organs than we do. There's a description of them in the book. I think I would refer you to that. What else can we say, Inga?
About the creation, their children, I found that really interesting.
Yeah, they have, no matter how many times they renew their bodies, they only have one child. And the child is, before it's born, it's born outside of the female. You know, so they have technology for reproduction. Yeah, when a child, two children are selected. Two children who are going to be mates in the future are selected before they're born to be mates. Mm-hmm. So it's a very organized society. They control very much the who was born and when. They have technology that. If the child for some reason has an accident or dies or whatever, they have a technology that will maintain the consciousness of the young of the child while another body is grown. That's only for a child. If an adult apparently is handled differently. If an adult dies, the consciousness goes into the collective and is maintained that way while a new body is formed. They have an education system, and it's based on telepathy. They'll have maybe 1,000 students in the room, with one instructor. Paul, the medium, he has had a lot more experience, hands-on experience with this kind of thing than I have, of course. I mean, he has visited the places where they educate. Yeah, I don't think he was very comfortable there. He felt like he was on show. So I don't think he went back again. Let's see, what else can we say? They have an understanding of reality that is different from ours. Everything is founded on consciousness. As one of the jobs I've taken on is to try to make that understandable to people here. And I've just finished a fairly long article about the cosmology of the Zetas, and turns out that other people are starting to think the same way. In fact, it's based on very old Earth ideas, and I think, well, I'm not sure where they all came from. Like the Hindu people, for example, have a cosmology that at least generally speaking, is quite similar to what the Zetas described. Although the Zetas description of it is much more. Well, it's much more, makes more sense in terms of what we know, what our science is all about. The interesting thing is that what we think is matter, and what that desk in front of you is not separate from you. It is actually a construction in your mind. Everything that we experience is like that, and it's not. We all share the same environment because. There is a representation of everything in consciousness. It's a mental universe, but in this mental universe, there are representations of everything that exists. We can experience these representations in our consciousness as sensations, and we interpret these sensations as being matter, objects of matter. And we see them as outside of us, when they're actually all that really exists is in your mind. It's kind of a hard concept to feel comfortable with. When you're walking down the street and on the sidewalk, every time you take a step forward, that sidewalk is not really there. What you are doing is experiencing representations of matter that you interpret as being the sidewalk.
William, you said in regards to where they live, I had, when we had the Monroe here, I had people, the first time a lady came to me and said, you wouldn't believe this story. And I go, I believe nearly any story now. And she was talking that she was traveling in an out-of-body experience. She was traveling between the stars. She said it was sort of like between the stars. And she has, she always thought she had a spirit helper. So the spirit helper was next to her, and they stopped at a planet where there was like a metal doors. She was saying, to me, it looked like metal doors. And when we stood in front of the door, that helper said to her, turn to me and look at me. And she looked at Zeta. Then he said to her, look down your body. And when she looked down her body, she also looked like a Zeta. So when she went into this space, she was explaining that there was a lot of, like you were saying, like walkways in different directions, or maybe one of the other girls I talked to before were talking about that. Like there were like walkways, and there were Zetas everywhere. It was like an underground city. And she was asking why she was shown this. And then he said, look at this ledge. And there was a ledge around on the side of the room. And there, as far as she could see, there was this ledge. As far as she could see. And there were beings jumping off this ledge. And Zeta explained to her, these are all races who will live in your world to change your world. And she said that it was just the weirdest experience. And then 6 months later, someone else explained exactly the same scene as she had experienced. Do you think that they telepathically give people these images if it's not physical?
Well, I think we make more of matter than we should. Shapes that these entities can take, or any entity can take, is somewhat under their control. For example, you've heard of reptilians, right? I mean, there's a whole story associated with that. And they appear to people occasionally. And we were told by the Zetas that they're not really physical beings, but what they do is they project an image of themselves into our minds. And so we think we see a physical being in front of us when it's really a projection into our minds. And so that kind of thing can happen. The Zetas do communicate with images to us telepathically, they say. For example, some people see lights in the sky, and sometimes they are projections into the person's mind if there's only one or two people involved. So matter, we make more of matter than we should, perhaps. It's the perception that matters.
But would you think that they project that into our minds so that we can understand what they want to explain to us, maybe?
Yeah, I think they do that. The Zetas have done that with me, for example. I've received visions during the time when I was writing the book. I've got images from them that help to explain certain things that I was struggling with at the time. I think it was from the Zetas. Paul wasn't so sure. Because there are other sources of information, right? He says, well, maybe it's your higher self telling you something. There's another source of information. There could be other beings as well.
So do the Zetas also speak about that about 30% of the human race is a hybrid and has a component of another race within their form?
Yes. That vision that you described, where all these people were destined to come to Earth, I think you said something like that.
Sorry?
You mentioned that vision that this person saw, that all these people were said to be preparing to come to live on.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, apparently that kind of thing does happen a lot.
Okay.
About 30% of humanity has what they call a hybrid consciousness.
The spirit people say that to us as well, though. I've heard it from them as well. Yes, we have heard it a fair few times, and I go, yeah, that's what the Zetas say.
Well, it's not just the Zetas. There are apparently a lot of ET races that have this ability to put their own body into a stasis of sorts, so it sits and waits for them. And their consciousness will then move to a baby, I guess a human body being born, and they will share this body with a consciousness from spirit realm. So there's actually two beings or two entities in this one body. And of course, when we're born on this earth, we don't remember what came before, and they're stuck in the same situation. So it's not unusual for people who have this hybrid consciousness to not be aware of what's going on there. Yeah, so some are, I guess, and a lot of the so-called abductions that are taking place apparently are ETs looking after their own. Basically, they will take a human on board just to check them out and make sure that they're physically okay, and then put them back. And so often that is misinterpreted because the human doesn't know what's going on, and they get frightened. And
because they can't remember, I guess. They can't remember their past, and they don't relate to that at the time.
Yeah. Apparently that doesn't happen as often as we used to think. There are some people who play up the scary aspect of this. But then in a recent survey that done by the free people, I don't know if you're familiar with that group. There are about 3,000 or 4,000 people that answered or responded to a survey, and they said that about 80% of them, at least, found the experience neutral or enjoyable. Right, so this negative aspect has been overplayed, perhaps. There's no question that some people are traumatized by it, but part of it could be, actual, abduction by beings who are just want to use them for some reason. But a lot of it, I think, could be just fear of the unusual situation. They don't know what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So you said something before about timeline. You want to speak on that for a minute? Or
one thing that happens quite a lot in physical mediumship are apports, kind of materialization of an object. And the Zetas, with our new understanding, or they're maybe not so new to some people, our understanding of the cosmology that they told us about, I think I have a better understanding now of how apports appear, and we can talk about that. It means knowing more about the nature of reality, I'm afraid. I mean, you have to talk about the fact that there are multiple dimensions of vibration, we call it, and that's a familiar term to people here, I guess. But that's one of the basic properties of consciousness, is that it has this dimension of vibration. And they refer to it a lot as frequency, and that's another term that people use. But I don't like that, because frequency implies time, and time is not a basic property of consciousness. It's something that we basically have invented to help us understand the nature of reality. But so I instead of frequency, I refer to it as vibration. The vibration is something that can be felt in the now, and you don't need to refer to time. And there's a sensation associated with it. And I think that's the relevant parameter here is the feeling of vibration. Vibration is also associated with the, I guess you could say love. Love is a dimension. And there are very low levels of love, and there are very high levels of love, and people fall anywhere along that. So it's not just a vibration; it's also a feeling. Okay, now everything that exists is somewhere on this dimension of vibration, and even you and I, we are somewhere on this dimension, and we behave. Somewhat like a low-pass filter, and for people who understand what that means, it means that we're aware of vibrations at a certain level or lower. But there's lots of stuff going on at higher vibrations that we are not aware of, and we will never be aware of unless we manage to raise our vibration to that level. So an object of matter exists at a certain vibration as well. But we only experience that object of matter when we raise our vibration high enough to exceed the vibration of that object. All right, so there are many objects in the universe that we cannot experience because our vibration is too low. So this relates to the Apports thing because there is a representation of an object an object exists as a kind of I understand it as a kind of a holographic-like pattern in consciousness. So it's a pattern of energy in consciousness that represents that object. And we can experience that object when we have we also have everybody has a perceptual process, which is also fundamental to consciousness, creation and perception. And an object can be created by thinking about it in a certain way and having the proper intention. And it can be perceived by a perceptual process that has a high enough vibration to experience the vibration of the object that was created. All right, so this representation of the object can be copied. Apparently, it's easy for spirit people to do that. They can take this representation of a Buddha or whatever that exists somewhere, and they can and move and make a copy of it and place it in the room where the medium is. The medium, of course, has certain properties that are important for doing this. So this representation now exists suddenly in this room, and we are presumably able to experience it with our perceptual process. And so this object then becomes visible to people in the room. And that's basically the way Apports work. When we first started talking about Apports, I remember, Inga, you were in the room there with one of the sessions, and they talked about it from the point of view of a materialist, you might say. We were at the time, we were still thinking that, at least I was still thinking that matter was separate from consciousness. Mm-hmm. You know, and that kind of they tried to speak to the level of our understanding, and so they tried to explain what happened when there's an apport in those terms. And now, when I go back and look at what they said, I can see them struggling to put it in terms that I would understand. And now I've got a new understanding after many more sittings. And I can see that they never really told me anything that isn't right. It's just that they were expressing it in a way that they thought I could deal with. Mm-hmm. I probably wasn't ready at the time to think of a mental universe, that everything it exists in consciousness in the mental universe.
Oh, hello.
Hello. William, with the apportations that you speak of, I presume none of the actual structure, if it's like a blueprint, did you say? Or how exactly, can you define it a bit more clearer?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
Exactly how are the apports moved from one space to another, did you say? Can you, is it a blueprint?
Well, there is a mental representation of the object. Everything exists as a mental representation somewhere.
Yes.
They explained to me how that was formed, how that was created. But that's sort of, for this purpose, for our purposes here, that's probably irrelevant. There is a representation of the object somewhere, and I'm not quite sure what this, like usually a spirit is involved in creating an apport. The ETs really, they see no reason for doing that, at least that's in the seance room. So if an apport appears, it's probably done by spirit. Spirits will take the representation of the object wherever it happens to be. I'm not quite sure where it would be or how they would access it. Space is part of our material reality. So I'm not quite sure what space means at the level of the spirit. Thought, things move differently, and space is different where they are. Thought things happen at the speed of thought, and so maybe all they have to do is imagine the object and then tend to make a copy of it wherever it happens to be. I can't tell you what they do. All right, I mean what they do when they copy an apport. All I know is that it's easy for them to do.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, there is something there, because when you say they make a copy of it, does that mean that the original doesn't disappear?
Well, they started off by saying that everything was a copy, and this is the assumption that we went under for quite some time. And then somebody mentioned, well, something about creating an apport, and they agreed that it was possible. So I guess it is possible for them to actually make one from scratch. And
well, the thing is that if there is something present in one particular place and it turns up as an apport in another place, but has gone from the original, that isn't a copy.
That's right. So it is possible for them to actually move an object from one location to another.
Yes.
I did agree with that. Yes. But they did most of the discussion involved making a copy. So my impression was that most of that time it's a copy made of the representation, and not a new one. I have an example of an apport though that I got from Kai in one of his sittings, which I think was not a copy because it was a crystal object and it looked like a stone. But when I lit it from the back in a dark room, I shone a light through it. I could see, if I turned it a certain way, that there were representations of a male and a female head inside. Now, I can't imagine that kind of thing happening naturally, right? So, and the medium, or the spirit control did say, before he made it, that they actually had changed the interior of the object with ectoplasm. So they suggested there that they had actually changed the interior of the representation of the object before they apported it. So they can do both.
So, William, are you saying then that the Zetas wouldn't be responsible for something like that, would be more the spirit world?
Yes. Yeah.
Because
they can change things in the seance room, but typically they don't. I mean, they implied that there was some kind of bureaucracy involved. If they did make changes to something, there was an overseer that had to say that this is okay to do. Apparently there's a council of extraterrestrials that kind of oversee what's going on in the Earth environment. And so anybody who mucks around with the Earth in that way would have to have the approval of this group.
And have you heard of, just while we're on that topic, just if you don't mind, everyone, have you heard of the council and what that consists of?
Well, I've heard more of who is not on the council than who is. It's the Pleiadians who are running the show. They seem to be in charge. I know that the Zetas do not sit on the council, and neither do the Anunnaki. And apparently the Zetas are a technical race, they said, and their function is to simply carry out the wishes of the council. So if the council wants something done, they ask the Zetas to do it. And the reason why, well, the Zetas are, as I said, a technical race, and there's also very many of them. There are trillions of them in the universe. So there is no shortage of manpower, I guess you could say. The Anunnaki said that they don't get involved with the council because they don't like the back and forth stuff that goes on. You know, the negotiations, I suppose. Whatever. They don't like the bureaucracy.
So, William, if the ET race aren't involved in the Apports, because the spirit world say you need a sympathetic link to be able to help create the Apport.
Mm-hmm.
How are the ETs then involved in seances, so physical mediumship?
Well, as a rule, they're not. They operate at a different vibrational level, and so you can't have both spirits and ETs together in the same room, typically, unless I think it has been. I think Paul. They did manage it with Paul at one time, but
Paul and Tom, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They did, yeah.
But there were they had to arrange special circumstances for that to happen. They had to essentially wall off part of the room, have it be at a different vibrational level than the other.
But can I just say something what I learned in regards to the Zetas say, just now, the Zetas and the spirit people. I had an event here, and the Zetas were there during the day, and then we had a physical seance at night. Now, some mediums set the energy before they do a seance, some don't. This medium who was there, when I said to him, "Oh, do you need to set the energy?" He goes, "No." And as I just during today, I had learned from the Zetas that if you have a spirit communicator talking through you in trance, if the Zetas enter the space, you lose your connection with the trance communicator. I know from experience that it is correct, that is actually true. So that day during the day we had the Zetas, and in the evening there was a seance. So during the seance, from very much beginning of the seance, the spirit communicator, the main communicator, and the spirit person who connected the loved ones to the cities could not get one connection right. So the whole seance, they were having discussions why they couldn't get the connection right. And when I asked the Zetas later on, they said because there was still residual energy which was interfering between the links between the spirits. I found that really interesting.
Right.
So maybe that was just a lesson you know, that happened for that purpose. But I did experiences, and there were 20 others who were here.
Of the interference of one with the other?
Yeah, that the interference when the zeta vibration is present, the spirit communicators couldn't get a link.
Yeah. Well, it just reminds me of the way that the process that Paul goes through when he begins a seance.
The stepping.
Well, the first being that appears is a spirit person. Remember, he has a spirit guide, John Collins.
Then turquoise.
Yeah, so I guess what the point is that he begins with, okay, we here in the physical are able to resonate with other levels of vibration, like in the astral or the spirit realm. And so that, but the ETs are not that easy to connect with, because they don't resonate with the vibration that we're at. And so he goes through a process that facilitates that. He'll start with connecting with the spirit person, which is apparently easier to do. And so they talk for a little while, and then the spirit person steps aside, and the Zeta will appear. And I've come to understand this as, and I think he now agrees. It took a while for him to come around, but I use the analogy of what I call heterodyning, the heterodyning process. This is something that is used by people who design electronic circuits a lot. What it is in an electronic circuit, if you have it has two inputs and one output. The output is a function of the inputs. So if the two inputs have a certain frequency, like frequency 1 and frequency 2, then the output of the device will have a frequency that's the difference between the two. All right, so this process is also used, or an analogy of this process is used by when dealing with other vibrations. If I, for example, want to raise my my own vibration, raise my state of love or whatever, I keep in my mind my own vibration here in this existence, and then I also have in my mind as another input the vibration of a higher level spirit being. It can be anybody that, for example, Buddha or Christ or whatever, beings that you believe to exist and are at a very high vibration. Right, so that if you then focus on those two levels, two inputs, it creates a difference vibration, which is the difference between the two levels. And when that happens, you can then shift into that difference vibration much more easily than you could otherwise. And I personally can feel the shift. I feel, or usually do anyway. Sometimes it doesn't seem to work very well, but you can usually feel that there is a sudden change in your body, and you feel a warm feeling throughout your body. And I don't know, it might be something that people would call love. I'm not sure, but it's what I would associate with a higher vibration. So I think that's what the medium does when he makes this connection with the Zeta. He has this higher vibration spirit person, and then his own vibration here in the physical. And when he puts his mind in a state where this heterodyning process can occur, he creates a difference vibration. And if the spirit vibration is the right level, that difference vibration will be at the level of the ET. And so then you can shift into that different vibration and latch on to the ET vibration and open up, and essentially resonate with the ET, and they can then do other things like open up communication channels, whatever.
Do you think that's related also that maybe the medium is partly Zeta? That the connection would be easier? Now, I was just, because I was wondering today before we came here, I was wondering, could it be that many of the mediums are hybrids? That they have that ability to connect to a higher frequency?
I don't think that's necessary. I'm not a hybrid, for example, as far as I know, and I think it works for me. So, there's a video by what's the drum fellow Melchizedek. You ever hear of him? He's he has a lot of videos on YouTube, but he has one there where he describes the process that he says a lot of indigenous shamans go through, and is connecting with Mother Earth or Father Sky, that kind of thing. And when I first encountered this video, I followed the steps as he led me along, and I felt what he said I should feel. You know, it was very, very rapid, very, very easy. And that you know, he's somebody who came to me out of the blue. As far as I know, I don't know. He might be an ET. I don't know. He might be. But this kind of thing should work, as far as I'm concerned, for just about anybody.
Interesting. So has anybody got questions?
Hi.
Hi.
You mentioned ectoplasm. I always wondered about that. So what is that actually? Is that life force in itself, or?
I believe it is life force from the medium. And it is definitely connected to the medium during the seance. That's the reason we, say you have to be very careful if you move, because many mediums have been hurt very badly and burned, because when the ectoplasm retracts very fast, it causes a friction within the body, and also it speeds the heart up very much and causes burns. And so it's definitely connected to the medium, yes.
Okay, so when the ectoplasm comes out, that's actually forming a body in itself that can manipulate matter.
Well, it can come out as gas. It can be fluid. It can be solid, depending how the spirit people work with the energy and what the experiment is. So yes, materialization, you would see it as solid. You would perceive it as solid.
Right. Yeah. So it is become matter. It's come into.
Yes, we perceive it as matter. Yes.
Matter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So have the Zetas spoken about anything aside from the ectoplasm? What else have they spoken about concerning physical? Have they broached that subject at all?
When we brought it up, they would talk about it. Yeah, there's a chapter in the book about interviews with about the subject, and I think it would be better for you to look at that than me try to remember what all they said. They do say that when a copy is made of an object, the copy is to the finest detail, right? It's the exact same size, same shape, same constituents. So it's the etheric form of the object, or what they call it a template, and it is copied exactly from the original object. But what else we can say about it? I mean, there's something bordering on the speculative in that article, because I tried to understand what exactly was going on when there was an Apport, and hopefully my thoughts will be distinguishable from what the Zetas have said. I quoted them verbatim, so you can see what they actually said. But then I kind of went beyond that a little bit to try to understand what it was, what was happening at a physical level.
What I would call the walk-ins. We often hear within the spirit realm that some people can only remember, say, up to the age of 13, and then they can't remember anything, they can't remember anything before the age of 13, only over the age of 13. So we kind of call them walk-ins, You read about it, you hear about it, and well-known. But are the Zetas or ETs involved in that then?
Not to my knowledge. They do say, they talked a bit about earthbounds and that kind of thing, but they just, they say that it's all up to the higher self. It's the higher self, all that it's concerned about is experience, and this is just another form of experience for them. So,
because how you were saying they jumped off and they could be classified as hybrids then to the human race. Could they then not just take it as a young child, but say someone in their 50s? You don't think that's possible?
Yeah, we didn't talk about that, so I shouldn't speculate.
Mm-hmm. And just one more quick question before someone else steps in. You said the Zeta race had to go underground. When they went underground, would you know what the building was like? Was it, still rocks and dirt, or was it a huge white structure? Or
yeah, they didn't really go into a lot of detail. They do say that they have sampled the flora and fauna from the Earth, and they have they have that in their planet underground. So they must have a fairly sophisticated environment in order to support that. So, but
yeah.
Beyond that, I don't know. It's the surface is apparently unlivable. It's still kind of supposedly a bluish glass-like material. So somebody, obliterated the surface at one point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, William.
William, in the Zeta world underground, did they say if they coexist with other races there as well?
Sorry, what was that again?
When the Zeta spoke of their home, so to speak, being underground, do they coexist with any other races?
Well, this is just their home planet, right? I mean, there are many of them in the galaxy, and they also live in many other places, other planets. So, as far as I know, they don't coexist with other races on their home planet, and that's all we really talked about.